You're watching Public Comment every Thursdays at 8 a.m. The live stream. Detroit is different in Bridge Detroit. Local politics of Detroit. Welcome back. Welcome back to Public Comment. We missed last week, but we're here again. Khary Frazier of Detroit is different. This is the show where we talk a lot about municipal politics, and municipal politics are definitely starting to simmer. So it's myself of Detroit is different, along with Malachi of Bridge Detroit. Malachi, how you feeling today?
Good morning. It's beautiful. I walked here I didn't walk here, but I was outside waiting for you to come out of your house this morning, and beautiful sunset. The leaves are changing. You know, it's getting a little cooler. The sun is coming up earlier. My stomach is all messed up. It's election season.
Yeah,
Things are going great.
I know. And the Tigers are out the playoffs. See, you should have went to another game in that other series, my brother.
I know. I'm sorry.
See, that's
they were
that's
too
what
expensive.
it is.
How am I supposed to afford to go to 2 Tigers playoffs games? That's not happening. That's not happening.
Exactly. See, we was winning because Malachi was in the crowd. It's like next time, that's what we're gonna start we're gonna get a season ticket pass from Malachi. That's gonna be a part of the Detroit is different pitch, because the Detroit is just a different city when the Tigers are doing well. So with that, we're gonna jump right on in to what's happening in Public Comment this week. Y'all already know my Councilmember Calloway always stirring the pot on behalf of the residents, and we love that. Tenants allege landlord retaliation. The city council heard from several residents who allege landlords are retaliating against renters who are involved in tenants' rights organizations. Roger Turner, head of the Sherwood Heights Apartments Tenants Association, said he is being forced to move or pay $300 more in rent after living in the building for 16 years. Outlier Media recently covered a fractured relationship between tenants and the property management company that took over in 2023. Clearly, we are being retaliated against for starting a tenants association, Turner said. Sheffield said the council is diving deeper into improving the quality of aging housing complexes across Detroit. The issue is happening citywide in a lot of our senior buildings, Sheffield said. Building conditions are deplorable, management has changed over time, and tenants are organizing. Though the council is working on rental inspection reforms, members expressed frustration with unsafe housing conditions. Councilmember Angela Whitfield-Calloway said the body isn't holding landlords accountable while people are suffering. So, with that being said, I definitely want you to speak to this because this is a heavy one.
Yeah, so Outlier Media did a really great story. I referenced it in the notebook, and it's linked in there for folks to get it. Aaron Mondry really dove into a lot of the issues that have been going on. I mean, essentially, a new property management company kind of took over, and the residents have been organizing. There's a number of tenants' rights associations that have been forming in the city. Stephen Rimmer was there yesterday as well to kind of vouch for some of the problems that people have been going through. And there's a tenants' rights commission that the council is putting together. I don't think it's fully staffed yet, but that's being worked on. So there's a couple of things that are being done to give renters more leverage in these relationships with landlords, where essentially, we've got some old apartment complexes that are in rough shape, and particularly senior homes. And yeah, I mean, landlords, there's not much that is kind of pushing them to deal with some of the issues that people have been raising. The city is working on a rental inspection ordinance, as I mentioned, that would basically require, and maybe we'll talk about it more in the show, but basically would require, certificates of compliance with the city. It would increase some fines for violations. It would create a ESCO program for people to put their money into while they're waiting for repairs. But we're not there yet. It hasn't been passed. Even if that would be passed, it wouldn't take effect until early next year. So Whitfield-Calloway is basically saying, what are we doing right now? I mean, what tools do we have right now? I think she's really frustrated by hearing this. She has been hearing in, working with residents in some of the senior complexes in D2 for months now. Probably like the last 2 years, I think they've been talking about this, organizing some not strikes, but protests outside some of the homes to protest the conditions, which are pretty deplorable.
I think, like usual, I love to put this in the macro so we can understand the micro. And the macro of this is Detroit was historically a homeowner city. That's why a lot of the renters' rights, if you meet anyone from like major renter metropolises, shout out Rebecca Irby at New Detroit. She was saying that, like, yo, what's going on with the renters' rights in Detroit? Because she's from the Jersey area, people from New York, people from Boston, people from Philadelphia, people from a lot of cities where people rent it. And between me and you, across America, most black people were renting homes. It was a Detroit thing, and the wealth that existed here in a black class, hence that black middle class people speak of, that was once a part of Detroit from the lens of things, where people own homes. And that transitioned over time, definitely in the foreclosure crisis, of everything that happened with the Great Recession. But along with the Great Recession, even before then, when people think about the ways that neighborhoods like mine, a lot of elders ended up hawking their house, as they say. Hawking a house is basically you own your home and then you're offered refinancing options. A lot of the refinancing options offered to people in my community were actually offered through the mortgage lending company that is most known in the city of Detroit. And it was under another name then. But a lot of those mortgages definitely defaulted, as we know what happened with the subprime loan. So if you all understand what a subprime loan basically is okay, hey, elder that lives in this community and you've owned your home for years, we can offer you $80,000 for your home that's worth $100,000, and you can work on repairs and do things that you haven't done in a while, and you only got to pay back 3% interest, and then after 5 years you're going to have to pay back 15% interest, which was very predatory on a lot of the elders in our community. So this is transition. A lot of those seniors that left those homes, I would say throughout the 2000s, those homes that they owned, as family even considered, hey, it'll be safer for you to rent, moved into a lot of these facilities that people are talking about. Many of those facilities, following in the macro, were built with HUD dollars. HUD. So the Housing Urban Development Department of America, and they were built for like a lot of government subsidies. So a lot of tax breaks, government money went into building these properties because it would provide low income quality housing for a lot of these people. And they would stay in these places. And those agreements with HUD would be for like 20 or 30 years. And then after the 20 or 30th year, you no longer have to honor those agreements. It was a lot of mix ups in the news about that for some of those properties, especially when we think of like off Woodward and Martin Luther King, that whole like corridor of Midtown, because the HUD leases, the HUD agreements were up at one point in time. I'm giving the macro because all of this kind of goes together, because there was not this huge amount of people in these spaces at one point in time, because so many people own homes in Detroit. So this movement of what's needed for renters' rights is all new. And the tough thing about this is, as a lot of actions are taken against landlords, the landlords that face the brunt of this are those landlords that own one or two or three properties. And it's tough for them to keep up. But the landlords that are exploiting a lot of this are the ones that own multiple properties. They'll own hundreds of properties, which under the foreclosure of many things in our land bank authority, there are certain people that are a part of investment groups from across the world that own hundreds of properties and partitioning off housing and different things for what will happen in renting. And the way that they're able to deal with people is deplorable, is the term. My project manager, Suzanne Clegg, that works with me, and what she's dealt with this summer about, it was like just things, these are common practices. So I'm gonna share her story. So the air conditioning unit above her home had a leak that was leaking from the unit upstairs through the ceiling, and from the ceiling into the floor. So too much water can cause molding. And nobody wants mold because we know the problems with mold happening. So with this causes damage towards a window pane, damage towards the floor, damage towards carpet being made, and everything. So after a back and forth exchange time and time again with different people in the renters association and property management, the property management that's not even located in the city of Detroit finally said, okay, we'll pay to repair this, and we're going to pay to put down a new carpet, but once this happens, we're going to raise your rent. So it's things like that that happen all the time because it's the wild, wild west for a lot of these other companies. And they also hide behind the veil of these property management companies. Going to another story of my great aunt when she was staying at the Jeffersonian. And we know the Jeffersonian, one of the prized jewels of Detroit at one point in time, but for the longest of time, they only had they had less operable elevators in a place where she stays on the 28th floor as an 80-year-old woman, you know. So she's waiting so long to get to the elevator. Sometimes the heat, your heat won't get turned on till like November 15th, and we're in the city of Detroit. And the way that parking structures possibly can be kept up, and even though you may have 400 units and they're not kept up, it's a wild, wild west. And in her time staying there, and I want to say she only stayed there for about 2 years, it transitioned property management companies 3 times. And this is very common practice. So you'll start an agreement and you'll talk to a person and you'll say, hey, this is my 80-year-old aunt. She need this, and this. And then the person smiles at you, they shake your hand, and they're like, okay, cool, we'll get on that next week. And then nothing happens. My aunt's frantic calling me. And then it's like I go back down there and I'm like, hey, where's Julia? And it's like, Julia doesn't work for our company. And I'm like, who the hell, what company is here now? And then you meet Steve, right? And then you work everything out with Steve where Steve's like, okay, well, your rent gonna go up and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, okay, thank you, Steve, for helping out. Then you go back, I gives another phone call, nothing happens. And then you go back again. And now you meet Fred. And Fred's like, I don't know nothing about that. We got so many other problems. We can't do nothing for you. Right. And these property management companies are still doing business in the city of Detroit. It's like three-card money. So you go from this building to that building, that building, that building, that building, that building, that building, that building. Because the people that own these properties are the same companies that own these properties. So, like I say, I went from macro to understanding how the micro kind of happens. And then I made a personal narrative story. And this is what's happening in the wild, wild west of what a lot of renters in the city of Detroit are dealing with. So I know that was a long soliloquy, but I want to make it real personal for people to have a better understanding of this is how people are saying, yo, renting in Detroit is tough as hell. Malachi, what you got to say?
Yeah, I mean, I know from personal experience a couple of folks, and it sounds like it's happened in this situation with Sherwood as well, where a new property management will come in, buy the building, and then things change. Rent prices go up, some of the terms get, you know, adjusted. You're not on the same footing you thought you were. Maybe you thought you were going to be able to sign another lease, and they want you to go month to month. Yeah, I don't know. It's tough. I had a pretty decent experience when I was renting here in the city, so I don't I feel kind of lucky for that, but I definitely know a lot of
It's
people
good.
are in tough situations. I mean, we had some, like, maintenance stuff that wasn't getting fixed that was slower than I would've liked, but it's not nearly what other people are going through. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think this, like, retaliation aspect of it is interesting. The tenants themselves are saying, like, they're being kicked out as a direct result of their organizing work, and they're being offered, month-to-month leases with higher rent, after this new company came in and after they began to push them, to fix some of the issues here.
And,
So
and this also highlights so much of the huge elephant in the room because so much of our city's money incentivizing through tax incentives and abatements are going to the low income
mhm.
housing and the developments being offered. And when we look at, and I think I need to probably just sit down with Aaron and talk to Outlier and also talk to the People's Platform. But the occupancy of a lot of these new spaces, it doesn't look like a lot of these spaces are being occupied. So with these new places being unoccupied, so it's places being built for somebody to come, and the places where people are in such uh they're not moving forward in a ways that are keeping people happy with where they're living. What's going on with who they expect to be the Detroit resident moving forward?
To your point on tax abatements, Stephen Rimmer from the Detroit Tenants Rights Association actually made that direct call saying that, look, if these people ever come to the city council asking for a discount on their taxes, if they're doing something new, which, maybe even a renovation of the building, they might ask for a tax break for. He said that the council should consider, these issues that tenants are raising. So that's an interesting. I mean, that's an aspect of the problem I haven't really looked at. To what extent are bad landlords, being aided by the city to develop new properties and kind of expand their land holding? I mean, we know speculation is a big problem. We know that, these
Mhm.
companies come in and they can buy up a lot of things, but
And and I'm also speaking from more into my caretaking. Rest in peace, Granny, but that was in Cincinnati. But my grandma in Cincinnati that lived in Avondale. Anybody that knows Cincinnati, Avondale, that's a black community like ever. Her property, uh, most my life, where she stayed most her life before passing away here when we cared for her as she passed on. Same company for from like the 80s through the 90s, and then like somewhere around that great recession was things changed over, and she was changing, the owner changed over, but the owners will hire different property management firms that interact with the people, and that's really the brunt of where it is. So owners, it's like, is that's also part of the three-card money. Some of these property management firms don't even necessarily, they're not owners of the property, they're just managing the property on behalf of the owner. So then you finally contact the owner, and the owner acts like, oh, I had no idea that that was going on, right? And the property manager's like, I'm calling them every day. So that becomes more frustrating also for a tenant to even deal with and have leverage for things like this. And it and this also goes back to some of the brunt of a lot of the landlords in the city are the people that may own one or two properties. That person that, may have inherited a family property. And with some of the ways that, okay, as you heighten the regulation, how does that regulation go? And I do believe that there should be different rules for someone that owns more than like five properties or that can house a certain amount of people versus something else. There should be like more explored, and I will hope that when this renters association comes together, and more so the commission, when the renters or tenants commission comes together, there are going to be different types of tenants and landlords on this commission, and not just looking at it from a purely corporate lens of what they would consider low income housing, because a lot of this is still coming from our tax dollars, because that's how we need to look at this is our money building a lot of these properties, because our money is supposed to incentivize people to want to build, when we're not necessarily holding true to the people that are already here, making sure that they just follow through on ensuring that the properties they have are kept. What's more important? What's to come or what you got?
yeah, I want to bring up too, the council was talking about a right to renew ordinance that basically Ann Arbor did something similar. This was kind of in conversation last year with the Detroit Tenants Association. It would basically prevent landlords from denying you to renew your lease without some kind of like legal cause. So that would, for this situation where people are feeling retaliated against and they're not being able to renew their lease, they're being put on month to month. That would potentially address that. But I don't know where that's at right now. This was being talked about at the end of last year. There was I think a draft of it that was requested by Council President Sheffield, and I haven't really heard anything about it since. But that's another, like, I mean, there's things that the council has been discussing and has been kind of working on to address this issue from a couple different angles. Um, and we haven't really seen those get through the process yet. But I know that's a big one that people were asking for. That was one of the major, um, policy priorities of the Tenants Association that has only really been around for like 2 years or so. I mean, a lot of this organizing work is really new in the
Yeah,
city, like you were saying, because of those historical reasons. Um, but I don't know. I think that's important for people to keep in mind that we're really at the beginning of this. People are mobilizing and organizing, and it's going to take time to influence the political and
most
government
definitely.
process.
Yeah.
But these conversations are starting to happen, which is new and interesting.
Yeah, and that brings us to Story 2, we're not so much time, but Police Chief James White now at DWIHN. This is a story not necessarily in the notebook, but oh man, and I messed that up. I didn't even have the right title. But he's going to take over as CEO of Detroit Wayne Integrated Health Network. Honored to be there. Experience in counseling. He's always seen a lot of the challenges of criminality as challenges in mental illness, which I do believe is one in one. And what we look at as mental illness in our society today, that is just such more of a popular topic to be explored and not looked at, I believe, is how it was looked at before when I was younger, is beautiful and wonderful. The tough thing is that as much as we're talking about it a whole lot more now, um, the federal and state funding that went into providing facilities of care for people like that no longer existed like back then. So, the whole concept of the nut house, I guess, as people would say, transition to, I believe that a lot of these problems are looked at to be solved with medication and not necessarily uh, providing facilities where counseling, possibly medication, and more can be given. And I'm not necessarily saying that all of those facilities were the grandiose places either, but um, as the old saying is, when England got in office, all the crazy people got let out, and it changed a lot of things, which adds to people experiencing homelessness and so much more. As yeah, crime, mental health, one in one. I believe in this story, we look at holding public office and then transitioning to another space of a nonprofit, more corporate world. Where does that hold? And especially one of the police chiefs that I believe was aligned in a lot of ways with community efforts. From leaving that public office, what could have incentivized him to stay? Did he have the resources to be there? Um, and the other political question of, with the mayor about to, it looks like in all rights, not necessarily run again for mayor. So under a new mayor's administration, definitely usually comes a new city police chief. So it's political, it's social, and it's business, it's bandwidth and capacity. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, so like you said, Chief White has served at the top of DPD for the last 4-ish years, 3-ish years. He's been with the department for nearly 3 decades. He, since coming into DPD, has kept the focus on the mental health crisis and the large number of calls that DPD has been receiving for mental health emergencies. And he's done a couple of things to try to address that issue. I think it makes sense him moving to DWIN. They have some different tools. He was previously serving with the Michigan Civil Rights Commission before coming back to DPD. So he had already kind of transitioned his career away from law enforcement once. DWIN's the largest community mental health authority in the state. Uh, I think, him moving there makes sense for a couple of different reasons. And you also mentioned, the mayor is probably going to run for governor. And so would a new mayor want to keep Chief White, either way? Probably makes sense for him to kind of protect his position a little bit. Um, it also reminds me of, they went on stage, the two of them, Duggan and White, at the Mackinac Island policy conference this summer, and to a statewide audience of business leaders and political leaders and nonprofit organizations, basically said that the state needs to invest more money in creating shelter space and psychiatric care facilities as a result of what you were saying, the disinvestment that we've seen kind of in the Engler era. I used to live in Kalamazoo, and people still in the mid 2010s were attributing some of the homeless population there to the shuttering of a
Yeah.
psychiatric facility under Engler. So
I mean, it went hand in hand. My interview with Kenyatta from Black Family Development, that leaves Black Family Development, when she spoke of it, that direct work right there, I mean, it still permeates. So it's more than just taking it away, is that they no longer exist. So that in people experiencing homelessness, and as a black man, is definitely boy, oh boy, I do not have warm thoughts towards policing in any way. As a critical thinker, I recognize how difficult policing must be, period. The mental health within that. As someone with that carries my name, Khary Mason, that is a spoken word artist and delivers some very deep, uh, deep tales about seeing certain things and served as a homicide detective and everything. You know, police officers are dealing with people some at their usually even if it's good it's going to be more stressful of the situation. Best case scenario as a police officer, like earlier this year, Kamala Harris was in town and they shut down like part of the freeway. And I was like, okay, why are all the cops shutting down all these exits on the freeway? And I walked up to him and I asked, what's going on? And he told me what it is, the motorcade. Things like that is best case scenario as a police officer. But nobody's calling you up saying, hey, man, you want some peach cobbler? When they call 911, you're going to be dealing with people in some of their most stressful, vulnerable moments. Hence, in those times, that's why the assistance of someone with skills in counseling can be there as an asset. And so much that we go through in life can be so traumatic, whatever those situations may be. And police officers themselves, I believe, are carrying a lot of that mental. Where is their mental balance at there?
I mean, there was an officer that, basically got himself involved in a shootout because of some of the mental issues that he was dealing with. He was on the SRT team, which is basically like our SWAT team for Detroit.
Hmm.
And that was something, I talked to Daryl Woods at the Board of Police Commissioners because a big question now is going to be who will be appointed the interim
Yeah.
when White leaves, and then who will be made, the permanent police chief, or at least permanent until a new mayor
I believe
comes in.
whoever the interim is will be just the interim until this election, because I mean, talking election, all the other election stuff happening, it's a lot, So I would doubt that the
There's a lot of
interim.
shuffling going on for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
but Daryl was talking about how he would like to see more partnership between DWIN and DPD and provide officers with some mental health
And
services.
that this is this is where this is where definitely conceptually that's amazing. But structurally, these are some of the biggest challenges that I call to question when it comes to our local government. What role does government and non-government entities play together, as so much is being privatized with our tax dollars? That's where things kind of become like, what relationship does exist? So, yes, conceptually, I agree with things like that. But therein lies so many larger challenges that can exist right there, especially when you think about that form of relationship. And I'm not even um, speaking to anything nefarious possibly presenting itself, but as we look at, the- so many things now with like the Riverfront Conservancy and all of this stuff, like these quasi public private partnerships don't have the same stake for me as a resident to speak to. If it is part of my government, I have way more stake into speaking to it. That quasi government, it's like we can have our office hours when we choose our office hours. We can allow for people to interact with us however they want to interact with us. But nah, if you're beholden to the public, it changes the game. Hence what a lot of people in Ann Arbor are asking for their power resource, hence the water department, as it moves even further from being part of Detroit. Like if DTE was part of Detroit, they would have to respond to Detroiters a whole lot differently than sitting in this quasi public private entity. That is more of a stance that I hold about a lot of these issues. So, where does that stand if that were to happen? Conceptually, amazing, but structurally, based on how our government functions, if our government ends up just being a series of these public private partnerships locally, then what are we doing? You know, you vote for a person and they give a, then we vote for city council, then city council awards votes on a contract to be awarded to whatever this quasi public private partnership is, and then the executive office executes certain services in alignment with this entity, and then something goes left and it's with the entity. But what protocols, what steps do I take as a resident of like who's even accountable? I talk to city council, they say, well, it's the business. You talk to the business, they say, well, it's the city. And then the city is like, nah, it's back to then the mayor says, or you talk to city council, well, you probably would go to the business. Then the business would say, nah, this is on the city's department. Then the city through the mayor's office, the executive team would say, well, city council voted on this contract and that was in the contract lines. Then you talk back to city council and it's like a episode of Larry Curly and Moe or something of like what goes on. Whereas if it's all under the auspices of the city of Detroit, you can go down to what is that, 2 Woodward and deal with this.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a good opportunity for us to start learning more about what DWIN does and what its partnerships with the city are. I can't really speak to too much of that. I was wondering, like, do you feel that DPD is in a good place to transition into a new chief? I mean, the city has been, city leaders, the mayor has been talking a lot about how, we're at this historic low level of violent crime. Obviously, a lot higher than it should be. Everybody knows that. Even the chief has said that, he part of what he was thinking about, because I talked to him in like May about, a bunch of different things and was asking him, when do you think you would want to move on? Is this kind of you getting to the end? And I didn't know any of this was going to happen, but it just kind of felt like, you've been there for a couple of years now. Are you thinking about retiring anytime soon? And he talked about how, he would feel more comfortable moving on if violent crime was, significantly reduced. And at that time, he kind of said, we're doing well, we're moving in the right direction, but it's still not where it should be. So, it's not like he passes over a department that has, solved all issues in the city. Um, although, things are better statistically than they were a couple of years ago. Culturally within the department, I think he's got kind of a mixed reputation. Chief White talked about how Chief Craig was very popular when he came in. And, anecdotally, I've heard some of the officers, have some kind of complaints about, White's, I think part of his like civil rights background,
Yeah,
you know,
you know what it
preventing
is. I
them
mean,
from doing.
basically it's like this. Obviously, Chief Craig was like, knock him in the head. Chief Craig was definitely the reason why, as a black man, police, you know what I'm saying? Chief White being more progressive is like cops are like, what are you talking about? Treat people as citizens, you know, which is, I know, excessive, but car ass sometimes can be excessive. But that's really how I see it, you know. And that's part of the culture of policing, because I think back to, this is an impossible task. You're seeing people at their worst, so at what point in time do you not see it? I remember one officer that I spoke to. He was like, yeah, man, I've been on the job for 4 years. Usually people are running away, then they got a gun. I remember the first time that happened and the guy hopped in the tree. I waited for him to come down. Then it's like 6 years later, he's like, I'm now to the time. I've been doing this for 6 years. You run in a tree and I saw you had a gun, I'm shooting you out. So being that he just point blank is in a casual conversation talking about shooting someone just because they climbed a tree with a weapon, I can only imagine what's happening outside of casual conversation, you know? So this is the psychosis of what you're dealing with. God knows a lot of people that stay in this force and department. Hence, that's why a guy like Hollywood Craig is the cop they want. Let's bust them down. Let's not lock them up, and let's deal with it, and let's be tough on crime. That's the thought process, which to me as a black man is basically, if you see a black man, be tough on them, because due to the guise of how our society looks, criminality is the face of me and my friends and the people in my community, because black men is what criminality looks like, further incepted through these ideas and perpetuated sometimes through the ideas of a lot of the media that we can create as well, just due to the psychosis of what's happening. So, when you get somebody saying, hey, let's understand what's going on here, let's deal with that, that takes more time, that takes more energy. That's something that a lot of officers didn't necessarily sign up to be officers to be. They didn't sign up to be quote unquote counselors. They signed up to be running gun shooting guys. So
That's
and
pretty much what I was getting at. Thanks. That was
so so I mean, as we get to a close, I don't know who would be next, but I'd imagine they'll be in that post. I
yeah.
believe that similar to like staying in a community like this where they say crime is high, and yeah, I look at it like the street economy exists. But it's always tough because the other guys of this is, back to the Khary thought process. America is this is stolen land. So a lot of the criminality that exists in America, as we see, it's kind of always been that. So what's what's crime and how people respond, and how do you look at what's wrong and what's right, and the ethics of this nation is always very interesting. And some of that is definitely flavored with the lens of I live in a community where people would say criminality exists. I believe there is a street economy. I believe a lot of that being handled with it is due to people's engagement with it. There is a time right now in society, which is good through some of the work in the shot stopper campaign, that's good. Like what Force Detroit is doing and starting the community relationships, especially monitoring a lot of the social media stuff, is helping. That is a resource. And that's a whole new approach to things, as opposed to the traditional, let's bust their heads up and let's make criminals criminals instead of trying to understand what's going on. I believe the number one way that we fight crime is to heighten people's quality of life. That's the key correlation. If people have higher qualities of life, a lot of the crimes that most people turn to is from a perspective of their idea of what survivalism is. It's not necessarily from a perspective of I'm just a criminal. And that is the root of a lot of things going on. When you feel like a criminal, that's where the mental health is needed. When you're in survival mode, you damn sure need mental health. But before you need mental health, you need food in the refrigerator, you need a roof over your head, you need clothing, you need to take care of the people that you need to take care of, and all of this can become overwhelming. Right now, I do believe that things will kind of coast and stay aligned and be good. But we're also in America. So, I mean, we're 2 days away from some type of mass shooting happening just because somebody lost a job, somebody can't afford their cancer treatment, somebody, lost a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or who knows what's going on, because guns are very prevalent in America and people respond to things with violence in America. As even when we study history, it responds to life as being violent. Hence, our society is violent. So, to say that violent crime is down is beautiful, but I know that it will still be prevalent because a lot of societal things need to change, which do deal more with mental health than anything else. So this has been like I'm like Jerry Springer giving final thoughts today, but there you go.
Who's going to be the next police chief? That's my question. Who's it going to be? Some people probably know already.
I'm sure. I'm
Yeah.
sure. I believe that it should be somebody that probably has I'm gonna always say somebody more aligned with community. More than likely, it's probably gonna be somebody aligned with the stripes. So,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it's useful to like speculate, but you look at like the deputy chiefs as like a potential option. You look at the deputy mayor, Todd Bettison. He was in the
yeah,
police force for a long time.
yeah.
You kind of wonder.
I thought Ty Edison. Yeah,
Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know yet. We don't know when chief will step down. He's in contract negotiations right now. So it could be a matter of weeks, could be a matter of days. We'll have to wait and see.
true indeed. With that being said, Detroit is different this weekend. Check out My Natural Hair Show. That should be real fun on Saturday. Right in the neighborhood. We connecting with culture. That's what we doing. Healing community through culture with media and events. What's going on your way?
This weekend, leave me alone. I'm sitting on the couch. No, I'm just kidding. I've been busy with going to these campaign events, so I'm pretty tired. Haven't really had some time to relax, but that's where we're at. 2 weeks until election day. Go vote if you haven't. These early voting centers are open. I'm not going to tell you who to vote for, but go vote.
Oh yeah, if you haven't getting 45 text messages like me every day, what is going on with you?
I had a fat stack of mail in my mailbox when I walked out this morning that was like overflowing, and it's all different campaign stuff. I'm just like, leave me alone. But yeah, bridgechurch.com. That's where we're at. Newsletters are free. City Council Notebook is free. Comes every Wednesday. I do some on other days of the week as well as the news comes. But we're a nonprofit newsroom based here in the city. Need your help. Would love your support.
Yep. And hey, when it comes to voting, also, hey, Detroit School Board is on this election too. Make sure you vote for school board if you're in Detroit. We need to know what's happening with school board. All right. Peace. Let's see here.
This is David Humphreys, also known as Hump the Grinder, producer of Hair Wars, getting ready for the Natural Hair Show 2024.
My Natural Hair Show 2024, Saturday, October 26th. You don't want to miss the creativity, the culture, and the community of all of this flavor and flair into natural hair. This is the 4th time around, and we're doing it bigger. Also, an international food marketplace. It's an experience that Saturday, October 26th, you do not want to miss at the Andy Art Center, 3000 Finkel. Tickets on Eventbrite.